Hi, everyone. It's Carla Johnson. And one of the biggest stereotypes that there is about B2B marketing is that B2B actually stands for boring to boring. But the truth is, when you dig into B2B marketing, it couldn't be further from the truth. And I would venture that there is a significantly more amount of innovation that happens in B2B marketing than perhaps consumer marketing. And that's what we'll dig into today on Connect the Dots. Connect the Dots is a show where we talk to some of the world's most successful and prolific innovators about how they find inspiration in the world, how they connect the dots into the work that they do, and make it all work in the companies and agencies that they work in. Today, I am delighted to have Tom Stein as a guest on Connect the Dots. Tom has been a leader and an innovator for over 30 years. And in fact, I think he first got that reputation when he started his first lemonade stand and showed people actually literally how to turn lemons into lemonade. We'll see if that's actually true, but I'm not sure. It's a rumor. His agency, Stein IAS, has been recognized as a Global Agency of the Year by the ANA Business Marketing for 6 consecutive years and 8 out of the last 11. Tom's been inducted into the Creative Excellence in Business Advertising Hall of Fame and has been named to the Who's Who in B2B Marketing list for 13 straight years. He currently serves as the president of the ANA Business Marketing in New York City and has led its growth to more than 1,000 members. I could go on for a long time about you, Tom Stein, but I want to welcome you to the show so we actually have time to talk about some things you've been working on. How are you?
I'm well, Carla. How are you? It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I think that's the usual expression in these situations. And and anytime I get a chance to hang out with you for a little bit and have a conversation is the highlight of my day. So delighted to be here.
Oh, thank you. And I know I miss our conversations and dinners that we'd have when I'd come to New York, or we'd meet up someplace else in the world and talk. But this will have to do for now. Hopefully we'll get together soon.
We will. We will for sure. But I do have to. I have to correct you on one thing. I am the president of ANA Business Marketing New York. So the New York chapter of ANA Business Marketing. But we're up to more than, I think it's close to 2,500 members now. So
fabulous. I'm glad that my information was out of date so you could correct it.
Well, you know, we grow we innovate, Carla, so we grow quickly because we innovate.
It is the name of the game for today's conversation.
It seems to be.
So tell me, like, with that growth, because that's something that's happened over what, like the last three, four years?
Yeah, well, definitely over the last 4 or 5 years, that's been the case, and it's been accelerating. So I think that I think it's aligned with I'll use the word innovation, but I'll just also use the word sort of dynamism of the B2B sector in general. And I think there's a lot of interest and demand for things that ANA New York can do for folks, which is, high quality content, high quality contacts and networking, and sort of building out the breadth of experience in a real community, of people who are passionate about B2B marketing. And so I think that's been a real catalyst for our growth.
And actually that idea, the whole B2B community is how you and I met, because I was president of the Colorado chapter. And then we both served on the national board before we became a part of ANA. And that is an interesting thing. And I think it matters a lot, especially to be a B2B marketers, is the sense of community, and that they aren't crazy with all of the things that they go through as marketers, because it's very, very different from consumer marketing. So that, I guess that's one of my first questions. And it's a little bit of a reflection of all of these awards and designations that you've won for so many years in a row. What is it that B2B marketers need to do so they don't have that reputation and stereotype that B2B means boring to boring?
Well, I'll answer that specifically as a little preamble to it on the point about community, Carla. I was at the ANA Masters of B2B Marketing Conference in Phoenix last week, so I attended physically live, the first first event that I've been to in more than 2 years, I think, live. And about 150 people attended. in Phoenix, and then there were hundreds more that attended virtually at this point in time. But I'll tell you, the sense of community, that being there physically together, and partly because it was first time out in such a long time, but it really is a sense of community, and I think that goes back to the BMA days that you were referencing, and it continues today. It continues today in A&A New York, and it continues today just in the whole network and the convening of brilliant minds in B2B that occurs all the time. So I'm a big believer in that community and the quality of the relationships in it. The question though that you ask, B2B, boring to boring, I've always hated that expression. I'm gonna be honest with you, because I think that in a lot of instances, it's people from outside of B2B looking at B2B and saying, well, that's boring because they're marketing something like cloud technology, or they're marketing something like engineered polymer solutions, or they're marketing whatever it is that a B2B marketer happens to be marketing. And it's certainly different than the kind of marketing, the kind of strategy, the kind of storytelling, this kind of creative that would apply in a consumer context, and it's way different from that. And I think that people they think of boring, but what they're actually doing is they're shunning the complexity, and they don't want to. They're not comfortable with that complexity. Whereas B2B marketers are comfortable with complexity. And I think that our challenge is to turn complexity into something that is accessibly simple, and that is enlivened by emotion and enlivened by electric storytelling and enlivened by all of those kinds of things. So I don't necessarily, well, I don't like, and I don't necessarily agree with boring to boring. That being said, I think that it's been part of our mission and part of many B2B marketers in this business, part of the mission to elevate that level of storytelling, to elevate the level and the interest level around the content, to imbue the work with greater emotion, to imbue it with humor, to imbue it with greater accessibility, as I said before. So I don't want to be overly long-winded about it, but I think it's part of the direction of travel that B2B is headed in.
Well, and I like that point about it's harder to be, I mean, these weren't your words, it's harder to be a B2B marketer because it is very complex. And I think sometimes when B2B marketers are asked to be more innovative or more creative in some of the things that they do, it's not unusual to hear excuses like, well, we don't sell that kind of product. We don't have a consumer brand budget. We don't have all of these things. But there's so much evidence of so many B2B marketers doing really remarkable work because of just what you said, turning these very complex things into messages and stories and experiences that are very simple. A couple of weeks ago when I launched my book, Rethink Innovation, we talked to Kathy Button-Bell, and the kind of things that Emerson sells are incredibly complex. And she talks about the simplification that they've gone through over the years at Emerson with that message and how they talk about the product. And before it was only a picture of the, whatever metal piece with all the wires in it. But now they're showing pictures of, babies who can sleep at night because of Emerson products and outcomes. And I think that's been a big step in how B2B marketing is showing that it's becoming much more human and willing to talk about how this all impacts the end user, the end customer, and what it means in the world than we've done for many, many years.
Yeah, I think that's right, and Kathy's is one of the great B2B marketers of all time, and she's a Hall of Famer. But it reminds me of, I was at a client executive leadership team meeting on Monday, and we were talking about content strategy and actually thought leadership strategy. And the company is one of the very, very largest and most significant food ingredients provider. So, it's what they do is provide ingredients to the companies that make food that consumers eat. And so they'll sell into the big food ecosystem. But what was fascinating about it is that there's so much complexity in their business, and they make things like starch-based texturizers for food, or sugar reduction ingredients, or other ingredients. And the fact of the matter is that everything that they do is plant-based. So everything that they do aligns with health and nutrition for consumers. Everything that they do contributes to sustainability for the world. Everything that they do contributes to supply chain transparency and supply chain trackability. So food safety from that standpoint. Local sourcing is a big part of what they do. And collectively, cumulatively, around creating taste and experience for consumers. So, what a contribution to the world that company makes. And, and we talked about so many themes that are so important in the world today. And I think that B2B companies, you'll find them in that position and in that role all the time. And I think we have a great opportunity to tell stories that are about both the essentialness of B2B companies in the overall scheme of things, and the end effect that it has on people, on communities, and on the world. And it's a theme that I keep coming back to in client conversations again and again. I think it's a really important one.
You know what, and I like that you brought that up, because there was a statistic when I was president of the Colorado BMA that we used to talk about that for every one consumer product and that touch point that a buyer, a customer has with a company, there's at least 12 behind that interaction that were B2B. And I think most of the time, this has always been the secret behind the curtain, a little bit of Wizard of Oz kind of things. But in this last year, when we looked at why didn't that toilet paper show up on the shelf? Why aren't there wet wipes? Why aren't all of these things happening? All of a sudden, it shone a light on B2B and supply chain and all of these things that never would have mattered to people had we not been in a situation when resources couldn't get to where they needed to be, or they needed to be diverted for other things. And I think it's added some interest in B2B companies and marketing as a profession that wasn't there before.
I totally agree with that as well. And you don't have to look any further than life sciences, right? And so
Right.
the role that B2B companies played in terms of enabling the innovations that let the world respond to COVID. And so whether that was from a testing standpoint and lab and diagnostics, or whether it was from actually developing the vaccines or getting the vaccines to market through supply chain and all of those kinds of things, the data around everything. And even the drug development companies going from the kind of clinical testing that's required that typically was done physically to being done remotely, and being able to move with speed to have that all happen in this incredible accelerated time frame. It's just that, again, it's category after category after category after category in B2B makes the world go round. It really does. And I also think that, and Carla, do you get any sense at all that I'm a bit of a B2B booster here?
I'm the same way. And it's funny because you and I are both history majors, right?
Yeah, correct.
And here we find ourselves in the world of B2B marketing for decades, and we are both huge fans of it. And I find that really interesting. Do you think, like, I know for me, my background, I have a master's in history. I know it made an incredible difference for me as a storyteller, as a B2B marketer. Do you think it's helped you in that way too?
Incredibly. Yeah. And also as an innovator, I like to think of myself as one. And I think that, innovation is rooted in past innovations, and, the next innovation builds on the one before it. But history major for sure. And I'll bet if we did a study, let's do a study, Carla.
Okay, right here.
I'll bet that there's a very high percentage that history majors index high in B2B compared to consumer.
Well, and this is interesting because BlackBerry CMO Mark Wilson, he's also a history major.
I know Mark.
So there's three of us in there now. But last week you were talking about the ANA Masters of Marketing, which is an incredible conference. I was sorry to have missed it last week. And they have the best of the best in speakers. And I know that's where you released some recent research that Stein IAS did about marketing maturity and growth and the B2B marketer's role in that. Can you talk a little bit about that research? And I think especially why you did it and why these results that you're sharing matter so much right now.
So the reason that we did the research is that we feel that post-pandemic, that and we're experiencing it now, that there's a surge, excuse me, a surge of growth, and that could sustain for some time. And I think that'll pertain to P2B, and it'll also pertain to consumer. And that as we think about that, on a parallel track, there's been our hypothesis, but not just our hypothesis. I talked to many CMOs, senior marketers, and B2B organizations that there's been a progression in the B2B marketing profession. That even rhymed, Carla. Progression and profession.
I'm impressed.
It's like that's the best I'm going to do in this interview. Is going from the traditional role of B2B marketer, which has been historically sales enabler. And so, in the old day, we used to, with a little bit of laughing derision, call it brochures and balloons. But sales enablement is very important, hugely important today in B2B marketing. But B2B marketers have assumed so much more responsibility, the scope, the depth, the breadth of the function, that they've increasingly adopted the mantle of growth enabler, and in many cases actually growth driver, where they have a seat at the table with the chief revenue officer, with the CEO, with the chief product officer, the CIO, et cetera, in terms of leading the charge to create growth for their enterprises. So it goes beyond a purely communications function, a purely sales enablement function, to actually finding the white space in a market, finding the disruptive approaches to finding the adjacencies in marketplaces, and really understanding how to align offering with opportunity and really drive growth from all of those perspectives. And so we felt that we wanted to kind of draw a line in the sand. Where are we now? Where are we headed? How, in what pace and in what time frame this has taken place, and also what the growth drivers are and what the growth barriers are from the perspective of our peers in the B2B community. So that's why we conducted the study.
Now, I think that part about the whole shift of the B2B marketer and our role, because we've talked about, especially the last 20 years with the internet and social media and all the things that we're able to do and digital transformation. I mean, if you didn't have it done before 2020, you sure got it done in 2020. That really moved up on your priority list.
Yeah.
But what are some of the outcomes? Like, why does this matter so much right now? I mean, what are some of the biggest things that you've seen? And do you have any examples of companies who are doing a great job with shifting marketing from these sales enablers, and I think we talked about balloons and brochures, into these true growth drivers in a way that the marketers understand this bigger role, strategic role that they have in their companies? Yeah,
well, one of the things that is interesting, just as a preface to my response, is that in our study, we saw that the respondents, and these are larger enterprises, CMOs, senior marketers at larger enterprises, in some ways the vanguard of B2B, really view themselves primarily as growth enablers and growth drivers, and a very, very small percentage consider themselves primarily sales enablers. But what's really interesting about that is that they also say that stature and status and the scope of responsibility as growth enabler or growth driver is a new focus within the last 2 years. So 46% say that that's a new focus. So when I talk about direction of travel and trajectory in the profession, that's pretty significant. I think that you talked about digital from 20 years ago, and we have been building muscle in all of the competencies around digital. And then 2 years, that's the pandemic period, really. And so we've really had to accelerate. To your point, if you hadn't completed digital transformation in those 20 years, you sure better have done it in the last 6 months, or in the first 6 months of COVID. So I think that's been a huge accelerant in terms of role, responsibility, and impact of marketers in their organizations. but to give you a specific, and this is my favorite right now. We have a client called Trelleborg Marine and Infrastructure. So certainly a household name for everyone. So what, and that's B2B also, right? So what Trelleborg did, and it's a really interesting, very cool company. Their business is engineered polymer solutions, and the part of the business that we work on, one of the main markets is the port ecosystem. So where trillions of dollars of goods, products flow through. It's one of the things that keeps the world moving. And we've seen during the COVID period, there's been a real strain in the port ecosystem. There's too much stuff trying to go through, and the capacity to get it through to where it needs to go has been an issue over time. But it's obviously vital to the world economy, vital to people in the world. So I'll use the dreaded P word, they pivoted. So we've been on a digital marketing transformation journey with them for a number of years. And so they were a balloon and brochure company, and now they're a 100% digital marketing company, advanced in their segmentation ability, advanced in their ability to gather and leverage first-party data for their total addressable market, and to get all of the efficiency and effectiveness benefits of all that, the personalization opportunities and benefits for all that. And so they're very advanced, and we've been their partner all along in that journey. So the long story short is that over the last year or so, a couple of years, we've been working with them on a strategy to deploy an Internet of Things approach. So they have their products all over, their physical products all over a port ecosystem. So they could be the big fenders and bumpers that make sure giant cargo ships don't smash into things, and they could be pipelines that go out to a liquid natural gas tanker that's offshore. They have products all over the place physically, and they've embedded them all with sensors. And by virtue of that, they embarked on a digital product development strategy called Smarter Approach, which we co-developed with them. And that led to the deployment of their SmartPort brand of digital solutions. So they've gone from a physical product solution provider to a digital product solution provider. So they've digitalized their offering to a large extent. And one of the things that we've been very focused on in the last year is helping them bring that all to market, and through digital marketing approaches, which we've developed great competency in the last few years. So, and long story short, it's been a massive success for them, where they've been able to create products to support navigation in a port, products to support safety, digital products that have never existed before. And that innovation gave rise to additional market share, gave rise to actually being able to spin up a recurring revenue stream from a company that's never had one before. So you can imagine the knock-on effects of all of that, and what that says to them about what their future can be as a company. And the reason I'm so proud of it is that we've actually just won a work effectiveness award that was given at Cannes. So that's the closest I've ever gotten to Cannes. It's something I just love to talk about.
Well, it's impressive, and I think what you've just talked about demonstrates the original thinking and innovative thinking that B2B marketers are really starting to bring to the table, to do exactly what you said, to become those growth drivers, and to show the rest of a company what marketing is truly about, rather than just the balloons and brochures. And I know you've also been doing some work around originals and original thinking, and moving that forward and teaching B2B marketers and leaders about how to become more original thinkers. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we actually just embraced a new positioning at Stein IAS, and our prior positioning had been the postmodern B2B marketing agency, and so that was about, the concept of modern marketing is really around the concepts of digital and automation and the tech stack, and our view, and when we launched the positioning of postmodern, is we needed to embrace modern marketing developed over the last 25 years. But postmodern was about the renaissance of storytelling, the renaissance of emotionally driven creative and content experiences, married with the digital proficiency and married with the MarTech and AdTech proficiency. And that was a path to the future and to greater effectiveness and success for clients. We've now moved a little bit beyond that to our concept of the B2B originals. And so next year, we will be 50 years old as an agency. And I would venture to say that without having done absolutely comprehensive research to say this with 100% certainty, but I'll say it with 95% certainty, that we're the longest extant B2B specialist agency in the world, and from a pure play B2B standpoint. So embracing B2B originals is kind of harkening back to that our own origination story, but it's really about looking forward, because our history, our place in the timeline of B2B, we have endeavored for that to be around innovation. So innovations we bring to the market, like the growth study that we did, the growth marketing maturity study that we just did, that we've been talking about, to assess how ready marketers are to embrace that mantle of growth driver. That's an original piece of research, and that's original thinking that we bring to the market. Or a few years ago, we did the first digital marketing maturity study and index, and that was another first in B2B. And we try to think about the ways that we can help advance this business in the interest of our clients, in the interest of ourselves, the interest of our people. And so the notion of being focused on the origination of innovation and being a place where originality threads through our culture is very important. And I think that is it's the ideal positioning for us at this point in time. So, I think the concept of original innovation is it's what we should all be seeking in this business.
Yeah, and I like how you connected the dots between not just being original, but origins and where Stein came from, and connecting that to your history. And I think that's a huge opportunity that we have as B2B marketers, is that it doesn't all have to be incredibly original. You can connect the dots between other things that are happening and see new connections in that way. I remember it's been about 8 years, I want to say, that Stein did research about the CEO perception of the CMO office. And I know I used that research a tremendous amount with my own clients to talk to them about their credibility in the organization. It was just so well done.
Yeah, and I want to do that again, because we did it a number of years ago, and I want to compare and contrast the findings. Yeah. I think they would be quite different than they were then. And
I think they would too. Yeah. Do you have that on the horizon anytime soon?
Well, I didn't before you just brought it up, but since you just brought it up,
more things for your to-do list.
Good idea. I love that idea. That's innovative thinking. I like that.
Well, we can talk about that more next time we get together for dinner. How are things in New York, Tom? Are your favorite restaurants opening up?
Yeah. They're most of them are still there, and all of them are opened up. And I just had dinner recently with Matt Preshern.
Yep, good friend of ours. Yeah.
Now the CMO of NTT, and Matt's a great marketer, and he's a lot of fun to hang out with, and we had a lot of fun hanging out. And it was one of my first business dinners back in the city. And sorry to waste everyone who's watching's time, but if you go to New York, go to this restaurant. But we went to a restaurant on 38th Street called Rossini's, and it's one of the great old school Italian restaurants. White tablecloth. There's nothing modern about it, and it's just wonderful, great old fashioned homemade pasta, et cetera, and we had too much fun. I had a headache the next day.
Well, he's a good guy, and he's Austrian, so I think right there, he can drink way more wine than you and I put together. So it's
I could not keep up. It's true. So I'm very competitive, so I gave it a go.
I appreciate that about you. That's a good characteristic.
Yeah, totally.
Well, thanks for joining me here today, Tom. If people would like to connect with you directly or follow more of the work that you're doing and research clearly now that you will have coming out about CEO and CMOs, where can they find you? And
Yeah, just find me at on LinkedIn, or find me at steinias.com. And do I have 1 minute to say something?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So here's something I'm working on, and I hope everyone will join me. But for the second year, we're partnering with the Drum to put on something called B2B World Fest. So this will be the 2021 B2B World Fest, and by head count, I believe our 2020 B2B World Fest was the most attended B2B marketing event of the year. And this year, we're doubling down, and it's going to be an absolutely incredible event. We have steering group members and speakers like Jill Kramer, who's newly CMO of Accenture, and Carla Sublette, global CMO of IBM, and Rachel Henke, who runs B2B marketing for Dell Technologies, and I'm going to have to talk to you, Carla, because I'd love for you to speak at it as well. But you'll find it online now, and it's in November. But I'm really hoping it becomes something that lives on the world stage, because there really aren't any other events that are global, and they're truly global in their orientation, which is why we call it World Fest. So we want to celebrate B2B. We want to celebrate its strengths, its innovation, and we want to connect the dots for the B2B marketers who attend. So I think I've covered everything there, Carla.
I think you've covered every phrase and term, except maybe if we could get people to rethink innovation and B2B marketing there. I think we've checked all the cliche boxes and all the right terms. Well, thanks for joining me today, Tom. It's been a delight.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks. For everyone else, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Tom Stein is one of the most creative and innovative minds in B2B today. His work is well worth following, and make sure that you download his most recent research about how B2B marketers are moving into this growth enabler and growth driver position in their companies. If you'd like to see more episodes, you can follow the Connect the Dots series on YouTube, connect with me here on LinkedIn, follow me, and we'll see you next time on Connect the Dots.